Hi, everyone. Welcome back to Taking the Lead, my podcast where I get to interview leaders I respect, mostly from the PR comms, marketing, advertising industries. If you don't know yet, you should, that I'm Ken Jacobs. I'm your host, and I'm the principal of Jacobs Consulting and Executive Coaching. So you may see a little swag back there. That's my Newhouse swag. Proud Newhouse alum. I bleed orange. So I'm so thrilled to introduce this gentleman to you, who's responsible for all my Newhouse swag. It's Tony D'Angelo. He's the department chair and professor of practice, the director of executive education and PR at the SI Newhouse School of Public Communications at Syracuse University, past national chair of PRSA. Many of you know him from that. Past global co-chair, Commission on PR Education. But like many of you, he was once a PR guy. He held senior leadership communications positions, corporate agency and not-for-profit, ITT, St. Joseph's Hospital Center Foundation, and Carrier. And I want to give a tip of the hat to John L. Sasser, because you may not remember, Tony, that it was John who introduced us pre-strategies and tactics when it was PRSA strategies and tactics. And I interviewed you for PRSA strategies. So that might be 15 plus years ago. Anyway, I've talked enough. I'm going to turn things over to Tony D'Angelo. Welcome.
Thank you, Ken. Well, it's a pleasure to join you. Thank you for inviting me. The reason that you have so much orange swag is you've always been so generous in speaking to my students in all kinds of different forums, both here and in New York City. And I really appreciate that and your own leadership.
Thank you. And I always enjoy that honor and I always learn something. So, learning is the thing that keeps giving, no? All right.
Absolutely.
Let's do some learning here. Question we ask a lot of our guests, three leaders inside or outside PR that you think are the most inspiring, and quickly tell us why.
Yeah, I have a very difficult time limiting it to three. Um, I believe that you can learn a lot just by watching, and I think I've learned a lot of leadership by watching people and say, I want to be like that person. But you've asked for three, so let me offer these. One would be Betsy Ann Plank,
Ah,
uh, who is, first of all, she passed away about 15 years ago. She was a legendary PR professional. She was an executive vice president at Edelman when Daniel Edelman was running the shop. From there, she went to ATT and Illinois Bell as the head of corporate communications departments of considerable size and stature. And I was so fortunate to get to know her through PRSA. And my impression of her is she was this tiny redheaded spitfire who was, and I say this with great respect, an elderly lady who simply outworked everybody. I mean, when she decided to do something, it was over. And some of the things that she decided to do were found the Public Relations Student Society of America. How
I
about
did not.
that?
How did I not know that? I'm a huge, anyone knows the podcast knows what a huge fan I am of Betsy Plank.
Yeah.
So I
And,
did not, but I
you
didn't
know,
know that.
she was the godmother of the Student Society, and she was so committed to that and was a genius at inspiring other professionals to say, you know what, that's important. And she would give you work to do. Trust me, in that regard. And then she was also very committed to the Commission on Public Relations Education, which builds a bridge between higher ed and the profession. Uh, she was the first female president of PRSA in 1973. And I can't imagine the barriers that she faced. I mean, here was a woman who was born in the mid 1920s And she just walked through the barriers. She simply did. I remember her fondly. A couple things about her. One, she smoked unfiltered cigarettes outside in the hallway outside of PRSA meetings. This tiny little lady did that, and she didn't email on principle. She just didn't do it. So if you were at a meeting with her, you could expect a long fax afterwards
Oh
with a
boy,
summary of action items,
that
and
is hysterical.
she would do more action items than anybody else. She was amazing. So that's one. Another example I would give you is John Paluzik, who is another past president of PRSA. I believe it was 1989. John is well into his 90s and is incredibly active in global public relations and, in particular, corporate social responsibility.
Wow.
John was writing about CSR in the 1970s. I don't think it had even really been defined yet, other than maybe philanthropy, that kind of thing. Um, and so he started as a journalist. He was with Ketchum, rising to CEO and chair. He was with Ketchum for over 30 years. And, I think elevated PRSA's game by his leadership. Um, and now he is the executive editor of Business in Society, which is a well-known journal having to do with the role of business in society. And here's somebody who's done it all. He's in his 90s and he still has his fastball. He
That's great.
he's
That's great.
he is to CSR what Warren Buffett is to value investing. I mean, that's the stature of this person, and I he's inspiring.
Yeah,
Another
absolutely.
another person that comes to mind is someone you've likely not heard of. His name is Richard Laubenstein, and he affected my own career. He's not in communications. He started his career as a manufacturing engineer. So in terms of kind of like profession and personality type, he's the furthest possible thing away from me. That's not how my brain works. He was the president of the carrier division that I used to work for,
Wow.
which is perhaps the most successful corporate entity I've ever seen up close. And for somebody, if you think about somebody who's involved and came up through the ranks in engineering and manufacturing, you expect a certain style. He was a genius, and I use that word very carefully, at inspiring high performing teams to perform at even higher levels. And he did it through collaboration and trust. I'll never forget, I was a very junior corporate PR manager. There was this giant corporate awards banquet. And so I'm standing there, not even knowing like where I should sit. And he said, "Hey, Tony, come sit with us."
Wow.
And he saw me probably a little shy and nervous and made it a point to integrate me into conversations. And that was very characteristic of his style. Later, as I worked with and for him, he always went to the people responsible for something to say, "How do you think we should do this?" And more than once, I saw him reverse his own decisions to listen to his
Mm.
team. And so there was incredible trust that he built as a result of that and loyalty. And this was very natural. And once he had that, boy, could he challenge you,
Yeah,
and he did. And for me, he was the embodiment of the win-win manager. So I'll never forget him. And he made a difference for me. So those are three on my
great,
list.
great examples. Just what really pops out at me from the third is just the power of when you trust your people, the power of when you collaborate, and the power when you ask questions and really listen. That is some
Absolutely.
powerful leadership because it results in followership, right? The ultimate definition of leadership. So, next question. You mentioned higher ed, obviously. You've now taught leaders from Gen X, millennials, Gen Z. I don't know if you're teaching Gen Alpha yet, but how do they lead differently? And especially important to our audience, how do you lead all three gens in the workplace?
Very carefully. I think a few things that I would offer about this, Ken, and I have had exposure to those different generations uh, and given my own vintage, even boomers,
Yeah,
in the workplace. Um, I am very wary. While I understand that there are generational characteristics that need to be attended to, levels of autonomy desired, for example, um, the value placed on corporate values as a decision making for who someone wishes to work for, degrees of comfort with interaction with people and technology, or maybe just with technology. Those are all different factors. But I am very wary of stereotyping people according to generation. Um, I mean, just to give one example, I mean, complaining about the fecklessness of the next generation, whatever it is, that goes back to Plato's Republic. I
right.
mean, this isn't new stuff,
Yes, yes.
that we're talking about here. And a colleague of mine was recently interviewed about the Gen Z stare, which I guess is a thing, the Gen Z stare, where Gen Z, rather than react verbally, kind of gives you a blank look. And this colleague, whose name is Jennifer Greigel, said that, she was Jen was interviewed on NPR. I find Gen Z to be great at conversations if you're actually engaging with them. And I think that's true. And I really think the onus is on us as communications leaders to learn not only the generational characteristics, but to go beyond that, to challenge ourselves to know people individually, which is really hard to do. It takes time, but it's really effective. There's a famous quote from one of the legendary football coach Vince Lombardi's players that he was tough. He treats us all alike like dogs, somebody said, and people laughed. And a more insightful player of his said, no, you're wrong. Lombardi treats us all as individuals. He knows who to yell at, who to coax, who to praise. And as a result of that, the guy's name is on the Super Bowl trophy. So
Right.
he got the results. And that tends to be the way that I view interacting with the generations. I think they're a reasonable foundation, but I think leaders go well beyond that to learn more about personal motivations.
You left out Lombardi's greatest honor. There's a rest stop on the New Jersey Turnpike named after him. Let's be
Is
sure to
that right?
let's
Wow.
be sure to mention the first one
That
when you near the
that's its
Meadowlands. The
that's its own
Meadowlands, right?
level of
Yes,
Hall of
right.
Fame right there.
It really is. It really is. So let's talk a bit more about the alma mater, Syracuse U. It has
Sure.
closed its diversity and inclusion office,
Yeah.
replacing it with a people and culture office. How has this changed the university's commitment to something we talk about a lot with our guests,
Yeah.
diversity, equity, and inclusion?
I will give you my opinion. It's an informed opinion, I think, based on working here and also interacting a lot with that office on campus and within Newhouse. There is a
Oh,
Newhouse office as well. My take is that it is a change of name and not a change in commitment. Um, at one level, Ken, I'm saddened by this relabeling, which is obviously forced by the current political climate, and I think that's really unfortunate. but that's the environment that we're living in. And many times, um, you know, part of it is we have to deal with the reality that's there and not the reality we wish was there. And I think that's where we are in terms of the environment. I see it as a strategic move to enable the continuance of a commitment to diversity, equity, and inclusion. Now, a couple things about that. I've heard about these kind of reorganizations and changes of name. I've heard to them referred to somewhat cynically as the euphemism treadmill. Oh, we can't call it that, we'll call it this, that sort of thing. But, I think it's a reaction to organizations not wanting to raise their heads over the parapet, and become a target. Um, Now, I was speaking to an African American faculty colleague of mine yesterday who's very concerned about that becoming a slippery slope. And I totally understand that. And you could see it as a capitulation. Um, but I believe, for example, our own, what used to be the office within Newhouse of diversity, equity, um, inclusion, and accessibility is now
Mm.
community culture and engagement. Our associate dean, Hua Zhang, who's a PR professor, by the way, um, has the same charge. I mean, her job description and what she's hoping to achieve is the same. So I've given some thought to this, and I really think the potential damage to students, to professors, to education programs, to the funding of scholarships and research, the risk to that, I think, is more is greater than the risk of changing names and reporting lines. And ultimately, I think what really matters is intent and effectiveness. And I think that's what's going to tell the tale. Where this is going ultimately, I don't know. But that's the way I view our situation here at Syracuse University.
Thank you. So, anyone who's seen the podcast, seen my writing, seen me speak, knows that I believe that this industry, PR and comms, has had a track record in promoting people into leadership, promoting executives into leadership. They're great at PR or comms or digital or social or, the biz dev, on the agency side, or
Yep.
just the practice of PR without always taking into account the fact that it's a different skill set. It's a different skill set. Sure, most people are practitioners and then managers and then leaders, but I do feel we promote without really training and mentoring and all those things. What's your take on that for our industry?
I agree 100%. And I also don't think that that particular tendency is restricted to the PR profession.
Mm,
I've seen it happen. I mean, it's like taking the master chef and making her the restaurant manager. They're different skill sets. It's like taking the first violinist and asking him to put down the violin, turn his back to the audience, and conduct the orchestra.
yeah, yeah,
So,
great analogy.
totally different. Um, you've probably heard the old saying, pay for performance, promote for potential. And I think that, that is relevant to this idea. If we look at potential in the realm of leadership attributes, um, it's important to consider, is someone equipped for the very different role of leadership? And are they trained in the development of that? And I think that's critically important. I mean, I'll bet we've all experienced reporting to somebody who has not been properly equipped for that, not properly trained. And I'm not in any way, there's no shame in being a masterful speechwriter, by the way, a great new business development person or media
Yeah.
planner, but it's an appreciation of the skill sets. And, you know, um, that person who has mastered those skills and should be paid, right? For those, if that's what gets them the leadership job, and you know, frankly, they can't lead a two-person parade, that that's I mean, frankly, I think it ultimately, first of all, it has the potential to damage the organization,
Oh,
to lead
sure.
to lead to the flight of the people under that person's charge, and to make that person ultimately unhappy.
Yeah.
You
Yeah.
know, so I
Absolutely.
do agree with you that that's a tendency and we need to be careful about that.
Yeah, I agree. And let's keep advocating for greater training and leadership, if I may, greater coaching to become a better leader. I mean, it is coachable and it's trainable and it's with practice, I think, learnable. Okay, let's have some fun. What's
Okay.
something about Tony D'Angelo we wouldn't know from your LinkedIn profile?
Okay. Um, so let's see. I would say, first of all, let me say that I'm well aware that I look like a cross between Eddie Munster and a game show host. I mean, that's my vibe, you know. And
That is hysterical.
I am very much seen as a button down type. You know,
Mhm.
people know here at the university my corporate background. I was buttoned down then. I am buttoned down now. Um, I so you know, to just as more evidence of how much you know, of a nerd I am. I'm an Eagle Scout. And when we have a design class that designs typefaces that embody their professors, right? So I have a custom
Oh,
design
wow.
face.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. In fact, it's over my shoulder here. It's called
Oh,
Industrious.
that's funny.
That
I
is
see it.
so,
That's
you
great.
know, we're talking Dudley Do right here. Eagle Scout, industrious, button down.
Funny.
What people don't know is that I have a very easily activated funny bone. And when I start laughing, I can't control myself.
I did not know this.
Oh, I have friends who like try to get me laughing so hard that I start crying. I mean, here we go. You know,
Right, right, right,
let's
right,
get Tony
right.
going. And so what I've been able to do is understanding sort of the incongruity of that, like how I present versus, you know, I love a great laugh. Um, Sometimes I can use that to advantage. I had a student come into me, obviously really worried. She was in one of my campaigns classes and said, you know, how can we come up with more creative ideas for this campaign? I'm just stuck. And I looked at her calmly and I said, drugs, just drugs. And she started laughing, explode. It was the last thing
That's
she
great.
expected. And that sort of lowered the temperature, and then we could have a more serious conversation.
That is a hoot. I did not know that about you. I thought you were going to mention your socks because your socks
Oh,
are pretty amazing. I noticed last time I saw you at Lubin House. So this even goes beyond that. This is great. Tony, this was so much fun, so joyful. You brought such knowledge to me and our viewers. If people want to connect with you, what's the best way to do that?
sure. Certainly, you can message me on LinkedIn. My email is D'Angelo A without the apostrophe @syr.edu. Ken, I want to thank you for the opportunity
Ah,
to connect. It's a pleasure as always, and I appreciate what you do to advance understanding of leadership. I know I've
thank
learned a
you.
lot.
Oh, thank you so much. And on LinkedIn, you're not Tony, you're Anthony, correct?
I'm Anthony, yes.
You are Anthony. So we should make though everyone thinks of you as Tony, especially now that we know how funny you are. Like we gotta be Tony all the time. Anyway, thank you, Professor D'Angelo. It's always a joy. And for all of you out there, if you'd like to learn more about leadership, if you'd like to learn more about executive coaching, you know where to reach me. KEN at JACOBSCOMM.com. I'll spell it again, KEN at JACOBSCOMM.com. If you want to find me on LinkedIn, just look for the Ken Jacobs with some initials after his name, as opposed to the other Ken Jacobs or the many Kenneth Jacobs out there. So we're just going to thank you again and remind all of you, until next time, keep on taking the lead.